Good as gold.
Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens around the world. And guess where I am? I'm in Brisbane, and I'm with a very special Senator, Fraser Anning. And we're going to have a discussion regarding South Africa. Now, just by way of a bit of background to Fraser, and I'm going to get my crib notes. First of all, Fraser's first intro to politics was through the One Nation Party back in the 1990s, and that's when I first got to know Fraser. So we've kind of known each other for a long time.
22 years or so.
22 years or so, yeah. Okay, Fraser Anning is an advocate for white South Africans, and because of this has been pilloried by the mainstream media in Australia. Fraser is also a senator sitting in the Australian Parliament, probably the only one currently advocating for whites in South Africa. For the record, there is a huge expat South African population living across Australia and largely unaware of just how dire things are back in the homeland. Now, Fraser, how did you, or what was your inspiration to getting into politics?
Scott, I guess, I saw which way Australia was going and wasn't happy with leaning further and further to the left, becoming more of a socialist country, and then Pauline Hanson came out of the woodwork and pretty much said a lot of the things that I believed, and so I joined her party and then sort of supported her, and then eventually ran for the seat of Fairfax on the Sunshine Coast there. And was hoping to, maybe get into politics and make some changes.
Yeah, yeah. And what first drew your attention to what is going on in South Africa?
I've had a lot of good mates from South Africa over the years. One in particular who was a patrol captain with me in Malulabar Surf Club, Keith Gracie, and he told me a lot about what was happening over there, and I read more and more about it and realised the dire situation that I figured was happening there. It was like the same that had happened before in Rhodesia. So I could see it was exactly the same thing happening there, and since then I've had thousands of emails and people contacting me and telling me exactly what's happening, and it's just a frightening situation over there, and families like our own families being slaughtered, kids, and so that we desperately need to get these people out of there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when you talked about emails, you mentioned to me just now that you get up to 2,000 to 3,000 emails on a weekend, or one day in the weekend. So, you are totally swamped by emails.
Absolutely, and a lot of those, by the way, are coming from South Africa.
Right.
I wouldn't say the majority, but a big percentage of them
Right.
are coming from South Africa, telling us what's happening and trying to get help. And, they're heartbreaking, some of the things that you read there, and some of the photos that we see are
shocking.
For a good Christian country going through this sort of barbarity and the slaughter on the scale that we're looking at. We have to do something, and I did have a couple of allies in Parliament that were backing the emergency visas, which I've been calling for to get them out. They seem to have lost interest. I don't know why.
That's crazy. And talking about that, what is the agenda of the Greens, Labour Party and Coalition, who appear to be blindsided by the genocide taking place in South Africa? And we're talking about the white population.
They're so politically correct and so left-wing now. We have a left-wing party, a socialist party and a communist party running this country. There is no conservative alternative, and that's the problem. A decent sort of conservative alternative would probably be doing something about this, but I think that those three parties are so scared of backing anyone who's Christian and white is why they're not doing anything. It's just buggers belief to believe that these people can't see the problem, or they won't see that. They know what's happening. They're not seeing the problem.
Do you think that they're informed about what's going on, or do they just not care?
Well, I've informed them on the floor of the Senate on many occasions, and from of course from the Greens and the Labor you get held down as somehow I'm a racist for doing that, and that's beyond belief. But
that is crazy.
It is.
That is crazy. Now, just talking about being howled down, when I Google your name, it's not surprising that most prominent reports totally misrepresent the good, kind, decent, caring person that you are. How does this sort of fake reporting impact on you and your family?
Oh, I've run some pretty rough pubs in my time, and I can deal with their bleeding hearts and their condemnation of me, because I know that the people who are doing that are traitors to this country. They know exactly what's happening in this country, and they're doing nothing about it. As a matter of fact, they're facilitating the problem. It's not nice to be called all those sort of things in Parliament, but I think somebody's got to say, what needs to be said.
And of course, they're playing up to the media, aren't they? Because the mainstream media will never cover you in a positive way. And, if they have a go at you, then it's headline news on the media.
That's right, and look, unfortunately, Scott, that's what we have here. We have a very, very left-wing biased media, not unlike in America. They're never going to give you the story, and it'll always be a biased swing. They don't let Australian people make up their own minds. They tell you what we believe, instead of giving us an unbiased report so the average Australian can make up his own mind.
Yeah.
They give you the fake news all the time.
Yeah, well, we see a lot of that with South Africa. I mean, they
Absolutely.
What I always say in my videos, and I don't mind saying it here, is that if there is white on black violence or something that offends people in South Africa, it's international news.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be something as little as two white guys forcing an African to go into a coffin just to intimidate him. And they stupidly videoed this, and of course because of that they actually ended up going into prison, and that became international news. The black guy was fine. He wasn't tortured, he wasn't hit, he wasn't shot. They did nothing to him physically, and that was international news. Now, a white farmer can be tortured for hours by a gang of black thugs, and it doesn't get a mention.
Won't make the paper.
Won't even make the paper.
Exactly, and exactly the same thing happened just the other day in New Zealand. For the 30 days leading up to that massacre in New Zealand, there'd been 154 separate attacks, Muslims killing Christians, Hindus and Jews, and zero reporting. As soon as the opposite happened, it's front page news, everyone's condolence motions and impassioned speeches. Whatever happened, why didn't we have the same outcry over the slaughter of other innocents, like the Filipinos, 20 blown up, or a couple of hundred up in Nigeria, slaughtered, hacked to bits? Nothing. But one lunatic, and he was a lunatic, goes in there and does that, and it's headline news.
It's crazy. And just talking about that, your statement that the real cause of bloodshed on New Zealand streets today is the immigration program that allowed Muslim fanatics to migrate to New Zealand in the first place is right on the money. Yet you got hammered in Parliament for stating the obvious. While Muslim migration to Australia is officially welcomed, it seems like a lost cause trying to get the Australian government to give white South Africans who are facing the genocide a lifeline into this country. How do we overcome this?
Change the government, and the problem is changing from one party to the other. It's from the frying pan into the fire. Both of them are going to lead us to disaster, the Labor and the Liberal. Labor will just get us there a little bit quicker, that's the only difference. Good quality Conservatives on the crossbench in the upper and lower house will make a difference. If we can get 2 or 3 in both places, we can stop all this. We can change the way these people are taking us down this road to disaster. When they bring these Muslims in, they're opening the gates to hell. Anyone who can't learn from other people's mistakes, are bound to repeat them. And We have failed states all over Europe now because of their immigration policy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Their indiscriminate immigration policy, allowing Muslims in there. And everyone will tell you there's good and bad, that's great, but the fact is that it ends up in disaster.
Yeah.
So we have to stop that Muslim immigration now to protect our way of life. Otherwise we'll become a minority in this country, and I don't know any Australians that want to be a minority in their own country.
Absolutely.
With the South Africans, why I advocate for bringing them in instead of these people is everyone I've ever met is industrious. They don't come in here and get on welfare. They create jobs. I have one friend who builds the armoured vehicles, converts Toyotas into armoured vehicles. He employs 190 Australians.
Wow.
You know, so not only are they not a burden, they're net employers. You know, so they contribute very, very well. They have the same Christian values that Australians do.
Yeah.
It is, you know, and, you know, so we integrate very, very well. You know, I come from cattle ranching, farming country or grazing country, and quite a few of them are out into that business as well. Some of the best farmers in the world are the South Africans. Some young fellas up at Mariba the other day, we went up and saw their farms. And three brothers have huge avocado farm, a huge citrus farm, and a huge mango farm.
Right.
And it's the best kept farms I think I've ever seen. Those are the sort of people Australia needs, not people who come in here and sit on our welfare, don't integrate, hate us, and you know, then kill us in the streets. Some of them, you know, the terrorist types.
Well, just talking about South African farmers, a lot of the Free State has been in terrible drought for up to 7 years now. And these guys are on the bones of their ass, to be quite frank. And in this particular area called Bultfontein, which is the way the farmers stand together is extraordinary. And I've done quite a bit of coverage on that on my YouTube channel. You know, you've got to take your hat off to these guys because they really do stand together. And despite that fact, what's happening now is that the banks, and we're talking about like the First National Bank and Standard Bank and the other big banks in South Africa, are now trying to foreclose on them to kick them off their farms. It is quite disgusting what is happening.
Exactly the same things happened here as well, Scott. You know, coming from that background, you know, the banks are very quick to foreclose, send the receivers in, strip the place, and then on-sell it to the next customer. So yeah, and you're right. The farmers and graziers, people off the land, usually do stand very same as Australians. They stand together all the time and back each other.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What are your views about the Turkish Prime Minister's recent comments about killing any Christians from Australia or New Zealand who tried to bring Christianity back to Turkey? And where are the Australian media on this?
Yeah, well, Erdogan, in my opinion, is a grub, and he said he was going to send us home in coffins just like they did in the First World War.
Yeah.
Now he's not the man that Ataturk was. They had a great leader there in Turkey for all those years, and Ataturk had a secular country. Everyone was happy. They didn't want to, and by the way, when we were over there fighting, we were only fighting the Turks because they'd aligned themselves with the Germans, obviously. We weren't fighting them, you know, Christian against Muslim.
Yeah.
And Ataturk was a real leader, and he had a great, and he had Turkey in a great situation. People were happy. There was none of this, you know, walking around in the burqas and all that sort of stuff. This despot that they have in now, Erdogan, you know, saying that's a disgrace. But you wouldn't expect much more from the person.
Yeah. Okay, the mainstream media, as we know, are fake news. So how can we get the current implosion of South Africa and its impact on the white minority into the limelight?
Well, the only way, you know, when you're in these situations where the fake news is controlling the airwaves, there's really no opposition. One time, Sky was, you know, leaning a little bit to the centre and giving an unbiased view. I think they're losing that a little bit now, but this social media is the thing that we rely on.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I get a lot of my support from, and that's how I get to talk to people.
Yeah.
And I think that's and I put it up on social media. You know, the plight of the South Africans. I know that all the people who follow my Facebook page and etc. they understand what's happening, and there's a fairly big chunk of the country that are watching that now.
Yeah.
I know, if you know, we just opened the party just got registered 2 days ago, and you know, we've already had a huge membership take up.
Great.
The biggest, I think, in Australian history.
Wow.
500 people joined the party in under 12 hours.
Wow. That's
So
fantastic.
it is, and no one's ever done that before.
Yeah.
so what it shows.
What is the party's name? Just tell
It's
us.
Fraser Anning's Conservative Nationals.
Okay.
So yeah, that's been incredibly encouraging. What it's saying is that the silent majority of decent, hard-working Australians, the real Australians, I think they're fed up with the political correctness that we're getting from the left wing, the Labor, Liberal and the Greens. They've had enough, and they can see their country's in trouble, and they're coming out of the woodwork. Not unlike in Brexit, and not unlike in 2016 with the American election. The silent majority sort of came out of the, literally rose out of the ground and said, you know, we've had enough. And I'm thinking that this is an indication that we may have a good, strong uprising and take back control of our nation and keep our sovereignty and our Christian values. You know, people have had enough of this multi-gender rubbish and the safe schools, which is
LGBTQ.
who knows? There's more letters than you need to know. And also the safe schools things, which is trying to destroy the families and taking the right to rear your children the way you believe and giving it to the state. Well, you know, if I was in charge, I'd get rid of that day one. Our three political parties now are completely subservient to the United Nations. I would be out of that corrupt organisation in a minute. There's 193 countries, 56% of them are despotic dictatorships or Muslim countries, and they're telling Australians what to do. So we don't need them to help us. We can do it fine ourselves.
Yeah. Now, you raised social media a moment ago. The issue I have about social media is that there seems to be an awful lot of lefties who are actually running these companies in America, and the kind of restrictions they're putting on conservative voices in places like YouTube, Facebook, and other social media like Twitter is quite extraordinary. I heard, for example, that there's a move in South Africa to get the whole of the Cape to move away as a separate country from the rest of South Africa, because that is sort of like a white enclave. And they used to have quite a few Facebook pages where they talked about this. And apparently Facebook has knocked all those Facebook pages off to shut them up. And that's the danger. I can tell you right now that my main YouTube channel, Loving Life, is continually under threat of being shut down because there's a process called strikes. If you upset the community, you get a strike. And of course, because you're talking about what's going on in South Africa, and you're giving the bare raw facts, one of their adjudicators just has to get upset, bang, you get a strike. And if you get three of them, they shut down your channel. That's how crazy it is.
And I've had mine shut down before.
Have you? YouTube channel?
No, Facebook.
Facebook. Wow.
They shut me down, and they put me back on a few days later. But if you have a conservative view, if you have, and they consider you, well, you're a radical right winger straight away. There's no just normal right wing. You know, you're radical, and then they'll shut you down. And they have been shutting down a lot of conservative pages. There has been a backlash, and they've said now that they're not going to do that. So we just hope that they stick by their word.
Well, labelling is one of the favourite ploys of the mainstream media. They label and then they just let it stick, and you know
that's it.
You're stuck with that label.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Through my YouTube channel, I get dozens of emails every day from white South Africans trying to escape what can best be described as living in hell. I mean, they really are living in hell as a result of corrupt and incompetent black rule. the European Union has just passed a bill giving black Africans preferential treatment to the exclusion of whites. In your view, isn't that reverse racism?
Absolutely, it is. If we did the other way around, of course, you'd be hauled up in front of court.
Yeah.
But we've seen that all the way along in South Africa.
Yeah.
The government is pretty much advocating for people to take land and attack people, even singing the songs, kill the Boer and all that sort of stuff.
It's just
I
shocking.
watched that on, people send me that from South Africa.
Yeah.
So the situation is dire. The people have to be brought out of there.
Yeah.
And the government that doesn't allow that, they're culpable. They're part of the problem.
Yeah.
They're very happy to bring people out who are supposed refugees. They're fake refugees. They're coming across 3 or 4 other countries, sometimes 10 countries that could give them refuge.
Yeah.
They're coming out here for our welfare, and that's where they live. A lot of them, a big percentage of them, stay on that for the next 20 years.
And they have huge families.
Exactly. They even go home to the place that they were seeking refuge from for holidays and to marry people and then come back again. So that's not refuge, And when we have a group of people like the decent Christian South Africans who are being murdered on a daily basis, they are looking for refuge, and I'd welcome with open arms. And I know that most Australians, the decent Australians, would love to have them over here, rather than the fake refugees that we're getting.
What do you think the tipping point will be in South Africa, where something happens, and let's hope this never ever happens, but what they're threatening to do right now in Alexandra is a large black township, and it's sitting right next to Sandton.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the leaders of a protest in Alexandra earlier this week said on television, on video, and I've put the video up on my YouTube channel, he has said that if they don't get their way, they are going to encircle Sandton. Now, Sandton is a white area. Now, can you imagine if something like that happened and they just started going through the white folk? I mean, that's why I'm asking, what is the tipping point?
Well, for our government, I don't know. I thought that with everything that I've said to them and what we've put on our social media, they're not unaware of what's happening. They're very aware of what's happening. What do they have to do? Just have a complete slaughter before, a mass slaughter before they do something, in which case, all those decent people are lost? I don't know. I know that if we can get people into Parliament this time on the lower and the upper house, I can block any bill they bring up until we get this done. And that's the only way. The only way I can put pressure on them, and I have done it already, because I had the balance of power in the Senate there for a while, and block stuff. As soon as I block it, they say, okay, well, what do you want? And then they'll do it.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes. If they can't get their bill through, then
they'll compromise.
That's the only way you can get these buggers to do anything.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just talking about your links with One Nation. Actually, no, we'll get back to that in a short while.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the acronym BEE in South Africa? It stands for Black Economic Empowerment.
No, I haven't. No? Okay, yes, good.
Okay. As a direct result of BEE, brought in post-1994 by the ANC government, 1 in 4 adult white South Africans, with many of them are highly skilled, are now living in extreme poverty as they cannot get employment, while unskilled blacks in positions of power screw up the economy. What they do is, I'll give you 2 examples of BEE.
Mm-hmm.
A fellow wrote to me last week and he said, Scott, you won't believe this. There is a large company that's involved in selling specialized mining equipment to the mining industry. Mm-hmm. And they refused to put a white guy in because they would lose their BEE. If you don't follow BEE, you can no longer do business with, it's actually part of the whole policy process. So they put a black insurance salesman in, I'm not joking, a black insurance salesman in as the CEO of that company. Now that's one example of what's happening in South Africa. The other example, and this is something very personal to me, I know it sounds tiny in comparison, but it shows what's going on. There's a museum in Krikwatown called the Mary Moffat Museum, very historic. It goes way back to the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And the curator there for 30 years was a lady by the name of Hetta Hager, a white lady. And she was in her 60s and reached retirement age. And the museum authority, which runs all the museums around the country, which are BEE controlled,
Mm-hmm.
they said to her, look, we don't need you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, look, I'm happy to continue working here.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, no, we don't need you anymore. You know who they put in her place? The African woman who cleaned the actual museum. They put the cleaner in as a curator of the museum. That is what's going on in South Africa.
I have heard of this. I hadn't heard the acronym,
Yeah.
but you know, of them putting people in. You know, it was like in America. You know, whatever they call it, affirmative action.
This is
You
much
must
worse
have-
than affirmative
yeah,
action.
I know, and I've
Yeah.
heard that, and destroying companies pretty much by
Yeah.
putting people in who have zero skills in
Yeah.
the job, and then expecting the company to perform.
Well, that's what happened to all the state-owned enterprises. The level of corruption and incompetency, because they're putting the wrong people in as CEOs, in places like Eskom, South African Airways, you can just about point at any state-owned enterprise and you'll see the same thing.
And
The level of corruption is incredible, and it
Of
comes
course.
from the top down.
yeah, it's going to implode. I mean, it can't keep going the way it is. You know,
Yeah.
I heard from another friend of mine, a South African, that the power grid is in such incredible disarray there
Oh,
that
it's shocking.
soon there'll be just complete widespread blackouts. And when you've got nothing, when you're completely blacked out, you know, you're a failed state. Your country's down the a bit like Venezuela now. They have 36 hours of complete blackouts, and you know, the satellite photos are interesting. You know, there's all the rest of South America's all lit up, and there's this great big black hole. You know, and that's what's going to happen in South Africa. So, you know, the sooner we can get people out of there, obviously the better.
Well, I'll give you one of thousands of examples of what's happening because of load shedding with Eskom. These plastic mould companies that, you know, have these special machines and they're plastic mould. This good friend of mine in South Africa, you're saying that one of his good mates has a plastic mould company. And when they load shed and they've got a mould which is kind of, you know, still being settled, it destroys the machine. They've got to strip it down and they've got to start again, and it's costing them tens of millions of rand. Now, that's just one particular company, the impact of load shedding. You know, that's happening in South Africa.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a disaster,
It's
isn't
an
it?
absolute disaster. Now, let's move on. There is an incredible amount of reverse racism going on in South Africa, a subject the mainstream media refuse to report on. What do you think it will take to jerk the fake mainstream media out of its denial about this topic? Do you think something really major where, you know, there's a massacre?
You'd hope that, you know, well, one, you'd hope there's no massacre, but would they report it? Look, I'm not that confident, really. We've had 154, as I said, attacks by Muslims on Christians and Hindus and Jews in the last 30 days. Not a word in our media. And people say, oh, well, it's distant. Well, we're all part of the same globe. You know, I think that these sort of things should be. I'd love to see a good conservative type media outlet, a bit like Fox News in America, that gives you that'll highlight these things. You know, and if we had that, you're never going to see it on ABC or Channel 7 or Channel 10 or Channel 9. The producers are not going to put it up there, but you find it obviously in good conservative magazines and on YouTube channels like yours, I'm sure, and you know, in my Facebook. But the whole of Australia needs to know what's happening there, and I think that you know, Australians are compassionate people and welcoming people, and when we can get them to see this plight that is South Africa now, the plight of these decent people being slaughtered, you know, then they'll put pressure on government. But the problem in this country is once we've elected these governments, you know, it's all party politics. and you cast your vote, they go in there and you get no say in it.
Yeah.
We've got to change that with citizens-initiated referenda,
Yeah.
which is what I'm advocating for. I've already put in motions and things to that effect, and then the Australian people get a say. I've put up a bill not long ago that would give the Australian people a say in who comes to this country, not just how many people, but who comes here.
Right.
Because for 45 years, no one's ever given the Australian people a say in who their neighbours are going to be.
Yeah.
And that's fine for politicians. They live in their leafy suburbs of their high walls. But the average guy in the street who's got to walk around with these people, who's got to look over his shoulder when he hears a car revving or walk through bollards to get to the shops, they would like to have a say in who comes here. And what's wrong with it? They gave us a vote on this gay marriage, which was terribly important for Australia, apparently. So why can't we have a vote on who comes into our country? And
Exactly.
the reason is, of course, that the government are scared of the result they're going to get. They're happy to stuff their electorates with some of these barbaric buggers who are bloody killing us, the bloody Sudanese who are flogging people on a daily basis down there in Melbourne and Sydney. Some of them deserve it, I think, some of those people, because they're the ones who brought them in.
Yeah.
But, let the Australian people decide.
Yeah. Now, you talked just now about the upcoming federal election in Australia, and you mentioned that if you get the balance of power, these are the sort of things you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you give my viewers a commitment that if after the federal election you do have with other independents the balance of power and your vote is critical, will you make the priority getting special visas for white South Africans?
Absolutely. Happy to give you that, give your viewers that commitment. It's been number one on my priority list since I've been there. As anyone who sort of watches what we do in Parliament, and it's a bit boring, but reading Hansard. But absolutely, that's the most critical issue really now. Well, for those people, but also for us, getting those people out of there. Emergency visas. Now, I did have Peter Dutton on board with me on it. He seems to have gone quiet or soft on it. He might have been told to pull his head in. I don't know what. I would have thought that he would have had a bit more ticker and stayed with me. A couple of the others have agreed with me, but the vast majority sit on the other side of the Senate. So if I can get good, solid Conservatives with me, either in my party or other parties, but they've got to be strong enough to vote the way they believe. Then that would be priority number one. Yes.
Okay. Now, just talking about that, I was reading that one of the problems we have in Australia is the migration of youth from the rural area into the cities, and what you've now got is these beautiful little rural towns which are kind of empty and they've lost their backbone. Wouldn't that be the perfect target place to get South Africans to go and to resettle it?
Absolutely, and one of the programs that I've got, or one of the things I've been advocating for, is conservation of water. So the Bradfield scheme, but the Bradfield scheme plus two more, which would be 3 times as big as the Murray-Darling scheme. We have a huge amount of water. If North Queensland was a country, it'd be the wettest country on earth, and we are the driest nation on earth. So all we have to do is what the Romans did 2,500 years ago, and the Egyptians and every other country in the world, get the water from where it's going out to sea and put it inland. Now we can do this. We've got a project. One of the guys who works for me, Leon Ashby, very, very brilliant man with water, and he has done every contour from the tip of the peninsula to the bottom of Australia, so he knows exactly where water will flow. Now, this project is all gravity fed. We can water the inland of Queensland all the way down past Winton, down to
So why aren't we doing it?
Well, and we can do it, by the way, Scott, for less than we've spent on some of these stupid tunnels under the Brisbane River and some of this stuff. And the reason they're doing that, of course, is the cities are so congested because of what you said. People have come in. We've got to get people back out into those regions.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, this would make Australia the biggest food bowl in the world. We could counter droughts forever because, with all that water you can grow crops and fodder for the animals. And it's, from the Tully to the Herbert to the Burdick and the Hells Gate Dam, the Walsh, the Tate, the Lind, the Ironsley, the Flinders, the Cloncurry, all those rivers are ideal for dams. Now, that last flood we had, billions of litres of water flowed out to sea. Did us no good.
Shocking.
That could have kept us going for many years to come, and that is exactly the place that the South African farmers would be most valuable.
Now, I've sent you a copy of the book, My Turn, which is on PDF. The book was written by Alice. I'll just call her Alice, and it's a great insight into South Africa today, and you've given a commitment you're going to read it.
I will.
And I think you'll find it's a real eye-opener as to what's happening.
Her turn to be slaughtered.
Yes, waiting for her turn to be murdered. That's basically what it's about. And it's how a lot of South Africans are feeling today. I had the classic example, in fact, this morning someone sent me an email. And in the Fourways region, which is between Johannesburg and Pretoria, literally streets of houses in a white area have been individually targeted by gangs, and people have been shot in their houses. I mean, and the media aren't touching it, they aren't talking about it. And these gangs, they can identify them, and most of them are kids under the age of 21. And they've got stolen guns, and they're just firing indiscriminately at people. It's just shocking.
It's a frightening situation, and people don't know what. No one could imagine what that's like until you live through it.
Yeah, you don't know when they're going to come knocking at your door or shooting through your window. Okay, political correctness rules, we know that. The only political party that has similar views to yours is One Nation. What are the chances of teaming up with One Nation over the issue of opening up the borders for white South Africans who are facing a genocide?
I'm happy to work with One Nation on anything that's good for the country, particularly or good for bringing white South Africans in. Sometimes you don't know how those people are going to vote. They tend to change backwards and forwards a bit.
Right.
So, but if they're happy to back me on that, I'm very, very happy to have them, as I would with Corey Bernardi or any of the other Conservatives. Unfortunately, sometimes they say one thing and they don't vote that way.
Right.
So it would be great to see them all of us get together on, particularly on this South African one. Now we still won't win against the Greens, the Labor, and the government.
But if you have the balance of power,
well, then we could, if they'd back, blocking, bills, then we'd be in the box seat again. But so far they haven't done that with me.
Right. Okay. There are nearly 60 homicides a day in South Africa, and those are reported ones, so it's probably a lot higher. And crime is rampant, while the South African Police Service, more often than not, do not even bother to respond to violent crimes. I've heard of where people have been really badly assaulted and they dial 000, and the next day the police haven't even come out. It's just shocking. The white people are stuck in the middle of this mess in an increasingly hostile environment. Do you agree that the white South Africans are facing a boiling frog analogy, while the rest of the world looks the other way?
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. And the sad part is that this is nothing different to what happened in Rhodesia. The problem is now that these people who are committing these crimes against the white South Africans, they'll destroy what they've got. It'll turn to chaos, and nothing will work. And in a few years' time, they'll be coming to Australia, asking Australia to take them as refugees or send them some money. And so it'll be another failed state. Look at the beautiful country that the South Africans built, the white South Africans built, only to be destroyed by these barbaric bastards who are doing this, committing these crimes. And then, of course, the United Nations will direct us to support them, because they're now in all sorts of trouble because nothing works and they haven't got any food, because the farmers aren't. The farms will just go to rack and ruin. We've seen exactly what will happen. So with history's going to, we look at history, that shouldn't tell us what's going to happen there. It's going to happen, and next thing we'll have to show some compassion for these murdering bastards, and I wouldn't.
You've heard of expropriation of land without compensation?
I have,
and what that's actually going through this month. and
that's
they're
right.
already identifying farms that they're going to just take away.
That's right.
Now,
Which will go to rack and ruin in no time at all.
exactly. Now, the issue is this, that Zimbabweans, black Zimbabweans, when things were pear-shaped under Mugabe, were able to come into South Africa.
And they were fed by the white farmers.
And they were fed by the white farmers. Now,
That's right.
when the white farmers go and all those farms shut down, where are the blacks going to go then?
That's it, they'll run out of food, and there'll be another basket case for the UN to tell us to go and feed now.
Yeah.
And which is why I wouldn't have anything more to do with the UN, by the way. You know, they're, like I said, corrupt organisation telling Australians where they should spend their money and who they should bring into their country.
Yeah.
And the problem is that Shorten and bloody Morrison and the Greens, they'll jump any time the United Nations tell them to. We should do what Donald Trump did and tell them to take a hike. We'll look after ourselves, and we don't need your help. Thanks very much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the land question is a huge issue right now. There are a lot of people who are very concerned, and expropriation of land, it's actually not land, it's property without compensation.
That's right.
And that applies to everything. So it can be a residential house.
Yeah.
It can be residential land. It can even be a bank account. They can actually take the money out of your bank account to go and help. And one of the things they're talking about in South Africa right now is the South African pension funds is one of the biggest pension funds of any country in the world. And they're talking about forcing fund managers to put a large percentage of that into companies like Eskom to bail them out. Now, what happens to the pensions?
Well, that's it. Yeah, then they'll be starving in the street.
Yeah.
Well, I've already, some of these emails I've seen where people are living now, people who had property and owned property, and they're living in a shanty. After all their generations, their work and their father's work and their father's father's work to build a beautiful property, to be now living in a pretty much in a humpy or a shanty.
Yeah.
And that's just soul destroying. How people put up with that, I don't know.
Yeah.
And like I said, those people coming here would be doing something and building another life for themselves. It's tough to rebuild a life, but at least they'd have a bit of a go here.
I'll just touch on that BEE again.
Yeah. Black
Equality Employment, and you can Google it, and you'll see, read up a lot of stuff about it. But what it actually does is it forces companies that want to actually deal with the government or with the mining industry or construction industry and so on, it forces them to have at least 80+% black workers. That's if you don't have that certificate, you cannot do work with the government. That is why you've got all these incompetent people running so many companies in South Africa.
Exactly, and if these people know that the company's forced to take them, where's the incentive to go and to work properly and do something?
Well, they don't.
They don't.
They've got a gravy train and they're just happy to take it. Yeah. Now, I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate the time that you've given us today.
It's fine.
There's one final question that I'd like to ask you. What is your personal message to minority groups living in South Africa? Now, I'm talking largely about the white population. And what is your message to expat South Africans now living in Australia?
Well, to the minority groups, I feel for you. If I could do more than I am now, if I was in a position to do more, then obviously I would. And after this next election, hopefully, I think the Australian people have had enough of what's happening, and that's why they're coming out of the woodwork now.
Yeah.
If they, if we can get the votes and get the people in there, say for my party, so good Conservatives or any good Conservatives, I really don't care.
Yeah.
We will definitely change what's happening over there by just blocking out anything that government tries to bring up or produce. If they've got a bill that they really need and we can block it, then we'll force their hand, and that's the only way you can get things done in this parliament now. To the white South Africans here and the expats here, I know a lot of them. I had a party with a whole heap of them a couple of weeks ago. Arno Nell and a few others down here at the Howard Smith Wharf, and there must have been 40 of them got there together, and we all had a good drink. They gave me some beautiful sausage called Boerewurst. A couple of the guys, couple of good South African guys, they play for the Reds, two brothers, and they make this sausage on the side. That's one of the best food. It fed about 4 of us, and you know, one sausage. You know, I'm so happy that they're here. They're great settlers. They're employing Australians. They're producing something. They've never been a burden on our society, and I'd like to see more of them here.
Well, I think in closing, the biggest and most positive thing that's come out of this discussion is the fact that you have made a commitment that if you are put in a position where you have the balance of power and you can force their hand, you're going to say, right guys, you've got to create special visas for white South Africans to come into Australia.
Absolutely.
I think that's a huge positive thing.
And also, Scott, you know, as I say, as we get more and more guys with me, before I put anyone up as a candidate, that's one of the questions. There's quite a few questions I ask them to make sure that they are genuine and they're not, you know, somebody in disguise. And I talk about the South African problem, and pretty much everyone. We've rejected a few, but everyone, all the good ones, are, you know, they understand it because they've been following my Facebook page a fair bit, and on board with that. So that's, you know, that's not a hard commitment to keep.
Just with your Fraser Anning's Conservative National Party?
Conservative Nationals, yeah.
Yeah, Conservative Nationals. How many candidates have you got in this federal election?
We have a lot. We have a lot. We have every state we have a Senate team. We have lower house candidates in Queensland, pretty much nearly for every electorate so far. There's 30. Tasmania, we have a huge amount. We've got a lot of people in Western Australia. Got to go over to see them next week or so. And New South Wales, so many people have called us and want us run for us. We've just got to go through and make sure that they're all the good, decent Christian conservatives like we want. Yeah.
Well, I can assure you that this channel will be right behind your party,
supported 100%.
And thank you so much for your time, Fraser.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott.
Great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Okay, great.
Keep up the good work.
Oh, certainly will be. I mean, this is my passion. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Alrighty, I'll switch off my...
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
No problems.